Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you very much for hosting us here. This is the end of a long day, an enormously interesting day, but people are quite tired. So I thought I would try to start by telling you some secrets. The first one is quite a small secret, which is the first things I said to Dr. Abdulatif when he took my credentials from me, so my first moment of speaking to Iraq formally as the British ambassador, I said to him, modesty is a useful quality for any British official in Iraq. So I will try to I've tried to live by that, and I will try to continue to live by that, and I think that might give you a clue to the future of British diplomacy in this region. After our history in this region, modesty is a useful quality for us. The second secret, actually, is really about the nature of diplomacy. I've hugely enjoyed today's session. I've got an academic background myself, and hearing some grand thoughts and grand ideas and grand theories about how what might make a new region, etc., has been very stimulating. But most diplomacy doesn't look like that. And we should always be on the lookout for the strategic opportunity to remake something. But if one looks back over the centuries, very, very rarely does a moment come when the world can be really fundamentally remade. And you might say that happened at the end of the Napoleonic Wars, it happened at the end of the First World War. Nearly everybody's kindly mentioned Sykes-Picot today, which I've felt 100 eyes on the back of my head every time it was mentioned. And at the end of the Second World War was another opportunity when the world could really be remade and diplomacy could do very grand things. If you look back over my career, if you take two examples of really big Middle Eastern diplomacy, one of them was the Oslo Accords, another one was the JCPOA-Iran agreement. They're very different agreements, but they are a very small part of a very big picture. So if we took JCPOA, an Iran nuclear agreement, which was an enormous diplomatic achievement, if you then put that into the whole picture of the Middle East, it really is a small detail. So the world in which people did discuss the Sykes-Picot, where lines got drawn on maps, and that's how business got done, and big powers carved up regions, is really an extremely rare moment. That is not how most diplomacy works. So what you will continue to see in the region, I think, from British perspective, but I think I can't speak for the United States, and I can't speak for my European colleagues either. But our interests will remain constant. We will continue to have energy interests in this part of the world. We'll continue to be concerned about terrorism. We'll continue to be concerned. We're probably increasingly concerned about migration, and I might just pause on that for a second. We will continue to have humanitarian concerns. We'll continue to have consular concerns, things which don't really make the headlines. That will dominate our time. We will also continue to have friendships in this region. It might be worth me very briefly saying something which is different about the British and also, I think, European experience of the Middle East, which is that we are societally connected now, and increasingly societally connected to this part of the world. I don't think there is a direct parallel to the United States and Mexico, or the United States and South America, but there are probably some ways in which you can understand better how a lack of order in the Levant, in Syria, in Iraq, directly and rapidly affects European society. And of course, the most eye-catching example of that was when 1 million people walked out of Syria through Europe and mostly landed in Germany. And it was such a moment of realization for many European countries that we were effectively neighbors. This is really not far away, and it profoundly affected European politics and probably continues to do so. I will very briefly say I think where diplomacy, so there may be moments in the coming years where there are opportunities to look for a reordering of this region. I'm not talking about borders, but I'm talking about a reordering of this region is possible. But creating the circumstances for that is very difficult. Using the circumstances when they come along may be possible. So we must be very careful to look at that. In the meantime, you will see us doing slowly the things which can transform this region, which are more at the level of education can transform this region, technology can transform this region, investment can transform this region, and the slow and patient work of building diplomatic alliances and friendships and capabilities it's so far from it's what struck me as I was listening, is that there are very high-level concepts of order in the region, and most diplomacy takes place at the level of people going into ministries, making partnerships and saying, oh, maybe we can help you go from a paper-based tax system to a digital-based tax system, which is a profoundly boring thing for me to say, but actually is the nature of much diplomacy in this region, far from the headlines. So I'll call it the whole time.
Great.
I offer a couple of observations. Thank you. You wanted me to go first?
Yes, of course. Yeah, right down the line. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm trying to be orderly. Yeah.
Sure. First of all, I would agree with the description David gave there of Iran having been substantially weakened by the events of the last year. Now, one can agree with the techniques, one can disagree with the techniques, but I think that's the reality. The power reality of the Middle East has shifted in the last year. That does not mean that Iran is without power. Of course, it still has significant sources of resilience within its society. But that is reality. The difficulty last time, it wasn't that there was an open acknowledgement of a trade-off, that in order to get this, we have to give them a pass over here. That was not how it worked. I agree, during that period, the breakdown of order in other parts of the region also opened up opportunities for those militias to operate. It is hard to conceive of a deal that now does not try to take care of those. It does not try to take care of the question of the armed actors either in Iraq or in other parts of the region, in part because if one looks back 15 years, say, when the JCPOA was at least being started, armed actors in Iraq were a threat to local order. They were a threat to the state's monopoly on force. They were a threat to sort of our forces in Basra, etc. They have now been armed with weapons which make them an international problem. They're not a local problem anymore. They have become a threat to international order. And so that is part of the Iran conundrum, which I struggle to see how one can reach a narrower agreement, even though that will be a diplomatically easier solution, a diplomatically easier achievement. I think it has to be a wider deal, but that is an extremely challenging thing to try to achieve. My final point here would be the situation is fluid at the moment in the Middle East. It doesn't look the way that it did a year ago. And in fluidity, there may be opportunity. Now, that's not to welcome what has happened in the last year, but it's to say that there is movement. And sometimes when there is movement, old truths or old alliances or old fixed positions can be moved. So I do think there could be a possibility of something wider, but clearly it'd be hugely complex to achieve.